Hey guys, welcome back to Jerky's Backyard Shenanigans. So on today's agenda, we will be turning this steel into a transmission cross member for the 79 Bronco zf5 swap. Now, we have a piece of 4-inch wide, 2-inch tall, 3/16 inch wall steel tube, and then a 1x1 chunk of 3/16 as well, and then I believe it's a 3/4 inch diameter, as well as a 1/2 inch internal diameter with, I believe, a 3/16 wall of steel that we will be tubing, or sleeving rather, these two pieces together, and the bolts will actually live inside this. And we've got a piece of close to 3/16 steel that we are going to be using to gusset it and potentially use as side plates. So that way we have a total of 8 bolts holding this cross member in. Should be pretty stout. We'll see how it works out. Stay tuned. Alright guys, so the main piece, got it all measured out. And this is a 36-inch long piece. And the frame, we're shooting for 34 inches. So we're going to lop off 1 3/4 inches. Well, I guess it's 34 1/4 since we're lopping off 1 3/4 inches. And once we get that lopped off, we're going to measure from the ends of the frame rail to each hole in the transmission mount, and then we'll drill those 2 holes in the top as well as through and into the bottom. Now when we do the bottom section, my plan is to cut out a square to make the mount bolts easy to access. Then we're going to weld the piece that we cut out directly to the top section, and that's going to give us, let's see, about 3/8 of an inch of actual mounting surface. So that should be plenty strong and it should not rip out. So we're going to use my favorite tool, the death wheel, and get that cut up. Alright guys, so I got it measured for where the transmission mount's going to sit. Now we're going to drill 3 holes so that way we can have sort of a slotted setup to take into account any inaccurate measurements. And as you can see on this side, I already drilled the 4 holes for the outside, and the reason why I do that, so that way we don't have any stress cracks accumulate. So it's got a nice smooth surface for when I cut it here to here. And that way it just makes it a nice clean edge. And then drilled the 3 holes, and we're going to take the grinder and lop off these little triangles right here and make it a nice smooth slot. Now this piece may or may not end up on the bottom of the top section, or it might wind up on the top. That just kind of depends on where it sits when we get it mounted in the vehicle. Now if we do have to put this on the top, that's going to act like a shim, and again, that's going to account for any inaccurate measurements. And word of advice, always mark which piece is the bottom, especially when you're dealing with non-symmetrical measurements. So the transmission in this truck actually sits over on the passenger side of the vehicle to make room for the front drive shaft and the 4-wheel drive T-case. So now I got these all drilled out. I'm going to drill out the top holes, and then we're going to make sure that it all lines up. And when that happens, I'll finish the cuts on the bottom, and then we'll figure out where in relation to this piece that bottom little section's going to sit. Now when I do go to drill these holes, I'm going to take this punch. So as you can see, it's got sort of a tapered edge. I'm going to hit it with a hammer, and that's going to make it so that way my drill bit doesn't walk when I start drilling. Now I'm going to start with a 1/4 inch bit, and I'm going to step up to a 5/16 bit. Then finally we're going to go with a 32/64 bit. Now that's just a hair over, or a 31/64 bit, sorry. But that's going to be just over a hair of 12 millimeters. Now the bolts that hold the transmission in are actually 12 millimeter pitch because it's off of a 90s Ford. So that's going to give it just enough wiggle room, but it's still not going to take too much meat off of it, so that way the washer isn't having to hold more than it's actually supposed to. Alright guys, so I kind of goofed up a little bit. I did not take into account the fact that when this is bolted up flush to the transmission mount, there's not quite a 1 inch gap on either side, and it is hitting my front yoke on my T-case. Now the T-case yoke, we can easily remedy that by putting a sort of channel in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a break from this bigger piece for now until we can figure out the actual spacing. So in order to do that, I have marked where I want the bolts to actually go through the frame. Now I'm keeping them center line with the radius arm mounts, so that way there's no guesswork and it's pretty easy to measure it out from there. And then it is going to be 1 inch back from the actual radius arm mount. Just give me a little bit of room there. So I'm going to start by cutting the 4-inch chunks that I need out of the 1x1, and then I will drill the holes where I need them to. I'll actually bolt the 1x1 in, and then I will get the bottom piece, the large piece of 4x2 in. And then once I get all that in, make sure all that's good and square, I will figure out the actual distance from this bottom piece of the radius arm, or the transmission mount, to the actual distance of the top of the 4x2 section. And then I've got a couple options as far as that goes. I could use that bottom piece that I'm planning on cutting out, and if that doesn't give me enough room, I have a piece of 90s Ford factory cross member that I've already cut up. Now this bolts in there where I need it to. So what I will wind up doing when I get the 4x2 mounted is I will probably cut what I need out of this, and then maybe cut another square in the actual top of the 4x2, and then that way we can weld the factory cross member section to the top of the 4x2 and then finish boxing it in from there. As you can see, it's not quite the same size, so what I'll have to do, more than likely, cut this flat section off, and then from there I can maybe push it out enough to where I can get it to actually weld onto the actual 4x2 and we'll go from there. Doesn't always work out like you want it to in your head. I'm sure if I put it on paper it would have looked great on paper, but I did not. So we're going to improvise and figure it out from there. Alright guys, so I got the 1-inch spacer plate that we are using just held in there with some 5/16 bolts for now. Make sure everything's getting square. I got it tack welded on all 4 corners for now, but as you can see, we've got about a 1/2 inch difference, so that piece that we were going to use is not going to work, and that pretty much leaves me with a couple options. I could use this piece and then box it in, but then that would leave a gap between the bolts, and I'm probably overthinking it, but I'm thinking that will actually wind up squishing over time. So another thing I could do is get a piece of 1/2 inch plate and pretty much cut it out the length or the width of this, the 4 inches, have it come about 2 inches past each of these transmission bolts for the mount, about 2 inches past either way, then weld that along here as well as along here, and again this other side and back here, fully weld that in, then cut my same grooves into that, which I think would be the stronger option. But as you can see, I do have this cut out. It's rough right now. I'll finish that later. That's to make the bolt access easier. So we do have enough room to where we can use a lock washer, or we can change these out in favor for some nylock nuts or something like that later down the road. But we do have enough thread engagement, so we just need to make it a solid connection from the bottom of the transmission mount to the top of the actual cross member. And I do plan on putting gussets, 3 on each side, from this point right here down to about here, so that will help with rigidity there. Now as far as the ends, I'm not quite sure what I'm going to want to do here yet. Kind of thinking about putting a piece of that flat plate that I'm going to make the gussets out of, put that up here, and then gusset it right here as well to that actual flat plate, and we'll bolt 2 bolts in this on either side, and that should keep it from going this way as well as this way. And then I'll finish this end off real nice so it's not open like that. But as you can see, we got about a finger gap between the actual yoke on the transfer case. So our front drive line should clear here, and if not, we can always heat this up and bend it in with a hammer to give ourselves a little bit of room for the actual drive shaft. But it looks like there's not going to be a whole lot that we're going to have to do as far as all that goes. It's just all the finish work on the sides, as well as full welding everything. And I am contemplating on taking some more of that plate and finishing it off in here, so that way this doesn't become a big dirt trap. But we'll see when we get that far. But so far that's where we're at, and as you can see, it looks like it's pretty square. I got about a 1-inch gap there, as well as a 1-inch gap here, so it's right about where we want it. And it looks like it should still give me clearance for the factory transfer case skid plate. And the original transmission cross member was sitting in this location, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the ears off at either side so that way we have enough clearance. And then that way this radius arm has a connection to the top of the frame also, and that will keep that from flexing around, since that is part of the suspension. And that should overall just make this whole section a lot stronger and less dependent on this, because I do want it to kind of be modular to where if I have to pull the transmission out, I don't have to pull the radius arm support out essentially. And then say if I have to do radius arm bushings in the future, I don't have to pull the transmission cross member out of the way, and I'm not relying on that not flexing around while I'm pulling the brackets and everything off. But it should overall be all right. And then if I do have to do, when I go to put the drive shaft in or not, it feels like I've got enough actual room to get my hand in here as well with a tool. I mean, we can even sneak an extension in there, so we're not relying on, again, having to pull the cross member for something silly. And then as you can see, the transfer case is supported right here in the factory location. I do have to kind of oblong the hole ever so slightly because the transmission length did change maybe 1/4 of an inch, not very much. So with this cross member setup, I'm going to put this piece that I fabricated years ago for my F250, but it looks like the exhaust is going to have tons of room, and it should actually be out of the way of the drive shaft, and then should still be able to service the transmission without pulling the exhaust. But as you can see, we have tons of room on this side, and we will be running a catalytic converter on this truck because of the engine year that we are choosing. So when we get our emissions test done, if they do decide to run it as a 87 Bronco, they'll be looking for all that factory emissions equipment. So if we put it on there, that should help our chances of passing. Now, because this is an aluminum tail housing on this transmission, and this is a 100 and something pound cast iron T-case with all metal gears, what I'm thinking I want to do here is build a bracket that will bolt off of either the PTO cover itself, maybe replace the actual PTO cover with our own bracket, and then we'll have 2 ears coming out with gussets. Then we'll put a bushing right there, and we'll actually tie it to the top of the frame over here, so that way when the engine and transmission kind of flex a little bit, the T-case has something to sort of hold it in position and not break stuff. So I think that's gonna wrap it up for today, but I will continue this video and show you all the finished results when it's all done. And hopefully once we get that done, we can actually start measuring for our drive shafts. When we get our drive shafts measured, I think what we'll do here is we'll get them rebuilt, bolt them in place, make sure that they're gonna fit. And then once that's done, we'll be pulling the actual engine and transmission in, as well as the T-case out. And transfer case is going to get rebuilt, transmission is going to get rebuilt, the engine is going to go back on an engine stand. And I really hoped I didn't have to do this, but I'm going to wind up using the engine I have in the garage that's bored 60 thousandths over. I tore into the one out of the parts truck, and it was a mess. There's tons of carbon deposits, quite a bit of scoring on the cylinders and the sides of the pistons. Looks like they were slapping around a little bit. So the most cost-effective solution I have in my cart of tricks right now is to actually use the heads that I got off of that engine, rebuild them myself, and then bolt them onto my 60 thousandths bored over motor. And then still debating on if we want to upgrade the cam in it or if we just want to leave the cam that's in it. and then we can get that engine all buttoned up and at least get the EFI stuff figured out as far as the fuel lines and all that. But seems like it's going to be the most cost-effective solution is just use that motor with those heads. Nothing special, just good old small block Ford emissions heads. And then maybe later down the road, since I'll have 2 blocks opening up, we'll figure out the 409 stroker build and really make this truck nasty. But for now, we're just gonna get it going, get it on the road, because it ain't been on the road for over a decade, and then we'll start making it fancy. All right, we'll be back.